Hello, and welcome back to Wright Virtual Visits. I'm Anna Kaplan, Executive Director of Great Cliff, coming to you live from Derby, New York. And I'll be your host today as we travel virtually to Springfield, Ohio, and visit the Westcott House, designed, of course, by Lloyd Wright and built in 1908. Let me start by thanking my partner in the 2023 edition of this program, Eric Rogers of the Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy. Eric is behind the scenes working his organizational magic and ensuring the show runs smoothly. And he's also working hard to be attentive to your questions. So, as always, please add any comments or questions on the Facebook thread, and Eric will catch those. That's a perk of tuning into our live program. Also, a huge thank you to Allison Wong and Forever Ready Productions. We are very grateful for the continued support of Forever Ready, which allows us to have a professionally run and polished program for you each month. Let's pause briefly to play a short video about the production firm and the services they offer.
You know that feeling you get when something inspires you?
The kind of feeling that inspires you to act?
That's where we come in.
We tell mission-focused stories tailored to your goals.
Our collaborative, efficient, and service-oriented creativity simplifies all your video needs. Relationships, not clients.
Stories, not content.
Forever Ready Productions.
Thanks again to Allison and the entire Forever Ready team. Today, we will be hearing from not only Westcott House's Executive Director and Curator, Marta Wojcik, but we have a very special guest. Sean Beckwith is with us on today's program. Sean, who is streaming to us from Richmond, Virginia, where he is currently the Director of Preservation Projects for the Tidewater and Big Bend Foundation. It was Sean who was the project manager on the restoration of the Westcott House from 2001 to 2005. I love how technology can support our discussion today and how the world is flat, because this is really interesting stuff. Marta and Sean will be showing before and after images and discussing the intricacies of the thoughtful restoration process at Westcott House, a massive undertaking. Marta and Sean, I'll now pass it over to you.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Great to see you, Sean. This is such a wonderful thing. Can you believe it that it's been, I guess, 18 years since you guys forced that stove inside the house as a last gesture for the end of the restoration. The restoration crew donated a beautiful stove that came from that period as a last touch right before we opened to the public. So it's such a tremendous pleasure to see you and to have your input. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. It's good to be back in Ohio with this countrysides and stuff. Happy to be part of it. And of course, as you know, it was a very special project for everybody that was involved, and how we pulled it apart, how we pulled it together. And with all of the architects, the craftsmen, and the Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy, and then all of the grant and funding, and how it was all pulled together, was quite a community. And so I'm really happy to answer any questions you have, talk about it, be off the cuff, and let's go for it.
That's wonderful. Well, we have, so everyone knows, we wanted to kind of bring back some of the very dramatic documentation from the restoration and remind ourselves just how daunting this project was. And so we're going to walk you from the front of the house, through the house, to the back of the house. At any point, if you have any questions to Sean, please post it. But I wanted to start with what a fabulous, just quite visible statement on East High Street in Springfield. And it looked quite different when you arrived. And I wanted to ask you, often when we have recollections of visiting Frank Lloyd Wright houses, it's full of beauty. It's almost like a religious moment, like with every fabulous, unique space. I imagine it was quite different for you since you were coming to a house that looked very, very sad. Can you tell us about your experience of first visit?
Well, as I had mentioned before, doing this project, I looked at it totally a uniquely different way. My my cousin Nan, Nancy Boyd Willie, was actually an original Wright owner. And so growing up as a young child, and then also into the 80s and 90s when Leif Erikson and Tom Quigley started asking Nancy questions about the house when she was in her 80s, she came back to life. And of course, I heard many stories about the house, her waxing poetic of how it was being in a Frank Lloyd Wright house. I had no idea. So for me, it was a little bit different, and a little bit different and special. Finally, experiencing what she was saying about being and living in a Frank Lloyd Wright house. And I also went to the Willie house in Minneapolis in 2003, I think it was, when they had the Conservancy meeting there, and finally could experience what she was mentioning with the spatial arrangement of inside and out, the proportions, how you felt in the house, and everything. So I knew that there was potential. And with doing restoration, we always saw sagging roofs, peeling paint, messed up things. So for us, it was like, okay, well, let's get to work, roll up our sleeves and just do it. So it was uniquely different. Um, yeah.
If we could see the slide, by the way, as a point of reference, it's a fabulous house that Sean is referring to. And by the way, we must mention that this house will be part of this year's conference for the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy. And Steve Sikora, who's now the owner of the house, is just an incredible person that has done so much for the house. So, and let's move to the then back to your story as you enter the Westcott house. Let's go to another slide and see just how rough it was.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. And Carrie Rasikas and Lisa Steele did a fabulous video, which you show with all the people, really portrays. And then Matt Klein talking about the house being held together with duct tape and bubble gum, I think is what he says.
And few
So
prayers.
yeah, and a few prayers, correct. Yeah, and that's how it was. It was in pretty rough shape. And yeah, this is how it
The
looked on the inside.
Yeah,
Just
so
like
the
this.
pond, if we could move forward through some historic photos now, we're gonna go quickly through it. So you see some historical reference to the front, of course, looking quite different in 2000. So if we could stop here at the work that is being done at the pond, I just in general, front was quite a challenge, right? It was all quite a mess.
Yeah, so the architecture team of Chambers Murphy and Burge and Schooley Caldwell Associates really dug into the archive drawings that Mr. Wright had and had to redesign a whole bunch of things. So this concrete form system here is showing the front reflecting pool. So we did have to remove it because the concrete had failed. But before you get to this photo, we had where that machinery is that Troy is in, Troy Holman. We just installed about 20 wells in the front yard for the geothermal system. So it was just a total mud pit for a while. So moving forward into the future, this shows the genius of Joe Cugini, who really was a very instrumental force in pulling everything together with all the complex construction and teaching many young men how to really act on a construction site. And so here we have a suspended form system, which we're pouring the walls of the pool. And after the walls get poured, then they're going to pour the center section. So it's an entire monolithic pour as Wright would have built it, or how they would have built it back then and how Wright designed it. Now, the interesting thing is that we built it to the size that Frank Lloyd Wright had, which was basically 24 inches. However, the building code doesn't allow that to be a pool unless you have a fence around it. It was too deep. So in another slide that Marta has here, you will see that the pool, the reflecting pool, has a grating in it. Well, that's placed so people won't fall into the pool and injure themselves. And that's how another interesting way that we got around the code to be able to do and to do justice on the whole project and the design and paying tribute to Mr. Wright and his work.
So if we move to the slide after, yeah, here you see, and there's a tiny bit of, you can get that glimpse of the grid that they were obligated to put to make it safe for since it's open, to the public, anyone can access that site. But this dramatic awning, all the details that went into that and researching that, it's just incredible. That's one of the things that when we, as you mentioned the video, when we show that, I'm so grateful that we have such great documentation of the restoration, because that's one of the, I would say, most exciting aspects of the visit to the Westcott house, because of seeing this energy and belief that this can actually happen despite all the circumstances. It's just really a testament to all of you that you just were hopeful despite all the odds. So there's another, I believe, picture of the awning that is just really cheerful and adds a lot. It's a maintenance nightmare, but
so
doesn't matter to visitors.
So what's interesting about this is that the upper awning, that metal structure was there, and I'm not sure how they arose at the color, but that's again Dave Butero and Schooley Caldwell's genius on figuring it all out. They did have the columns on the right-hand side, but the structure, Dave designed all of that from researching other systems of the day. But underneath this awning is actually some red clay tile, which we took up, looked on the back, saw the maker's mark, and Lauren and her crew, Lauren Burge, they called the manufacturer, which was still in existence in Wales, UK. We ordered the tiles from Wales, and we were actually able to get the correct tile, same tile and same color than what we just pulled up. That was the 100-year-old tile. So that's very similar to this color of the awning. So I think that's their license on the color for that. But it's really interesting. Yeah, all these different pieces, how they came together.
Yeah, always pay attention and look at the back of the wood board or tile or anything you can find. So we're moving inside. Oh, go ahead.
So speaking about that with the wood on the video, it was mentioned that also quick, like we found the house was renovated in the 1940s, so many pieces were used and reused in different locations. So when the Westcott House Foundation volunteers dismantled a lot of the house, they did find writing on the back of the wood. So the urban legend was that we did not know who wrote that, why it was written. Was it the builder? Was it whoever? Well, there was another building on the property that we disassembled in the backyard. And when we disassembled that building, we found that the cursive writing on that trim work was the same as the cursive writing on the trim work in the Westcott house. And it was basically mentioning a room or a window casing, a special architectural name. And what we figured out is that they all came from the same mill shop, that was the person that was assembling the order, and they wrote that, not actually the specific carpenter. So it's just really interesting looking for clues,
Yeah. And speaking of that, if we look at the next slide, one of the things that visitors always are absolutely amazed with, is the wall treatment in the house. And it's in much better shape these days. But back then, not only this is kind of what this is process of discovery. And I just to say, encaustic is a combination of paint and wax. So they melted wax. If you actually go to the next slide, you can see historic reference in a number of articles from that period. There was some information that was absolutely priceless, and you can see a reference to second fire at Westcott home, where they say about the painter warming the wax on a stove. And if you wouldn't have that context of the wall, it's like, what is he doing exactly? Well, he was working on all those walls. And were you guys surprised when, because of course in addition to that you had layers and layers and layers of additional paint on top of that, so to even get to the bottom of this, get to the idea of what was original treatment, was a challenge?
Yeah, it was quite a challenge, and thank goodness for the Secretary of Interior standards and briefs with all the write-up there from the National Park Service and Lauren Burgess and Bob Loversidge's and Dave Butero's breadth of understanding historic structures. This is the first and only time that I've come across this finish, and I've come across other decorative finishes, but this is the only project. They ended up doing some reverse engineering. Matt Klein's wife actually was a chemist at, I think, Wittenberg, and they did an analysis of what was going on. And then from there, we got in touch with a local artisan, Amy Calloway Korab, and she does a lot of faux painting and a lot of decorative finishes. Her and her mother have done it for years. They ended up having no problem with doing this faux finish. We worked with the plasters, Primer Plastering and Oren Associates, to come up with the correct texture on the plaster and then also the formulation. And we just had a whole bunch of mock-ups back and forth working on what would work and what wouldn't work. And we finally came up with a system, made the used the ground pigments into the wax, and then yeah, Amy and her crew recoated all the walls, and it turned out really well. So we're doing our best to adhere to the Secretary of Interior standards of, stabilize in place instead of rip out and replace. And that's part of the beauty of the house, showing the new and the old,
Yes, yes, because
and
quite
then
of it.
taking off the paint, that's a whole different story. We were doing different mock-ups, adhesives, tapes, heat, little tools, on and on and on. Sometimes it came off in decent sheets, sometimes it was just a dental tool. So on and on. Sometimes the wax was on a heavy layer, sometimes it wasn't. So it was really interesting and quite a challenge. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and we should say it was, in some rooms you had up to 35 layers of additional paint, so that whole process is unbelievable. Now, if you look at the next slide, one of the questions I always kind of dread, but it comes up a lot, is like, what are those walls made of? And without point of reference, this is actually pretty cool photo because it does shows us some the makeup of the wall. But could you speak to that? People are always somehow interested in how it all works in the Wright house.
Yeah, so what we have is we have on the left-hand side a little glimpse of the plaster, but you see the horizontal wooden lath that the plaster is placed onto and held on the wall. Behind that are a couple of the old pipes for the radiator. Why take it out? Just leave them there. The diagonal boards are the exterior wall. That's the diagonal sheathing, and then stucco is on top of that. After that, you have the two pipes, which are the heating and cooling pipes going to the air handler in the attic from the geothermal system in the basement. The next pipe is a cast iron sewer pipe, which carries all the waste from the bathrooms. And then you have the horizontal wood with the little bit of white lines in it. That's the plaster keys coming through the lath. And that's an interior wall, which that is the backside of the pantry. We're in the house now. And then we have the two copper pipes that are vertical, which is the hot and cold pipes for the bathroom above. And then on the right-hand side, what you see is the blue. Well, the blue is actually the outline of the buffet. And so what this tells us is that the wooden cabinetry was placed into the building before the decorative paint was put on. And when you go way up high, you'll see where the brown, tannish, goldish brown finish ends, and then it becomes a lighter color at that red tape. Well, that was where the top wood piece went. And so they also put the wood trim in before they did all the decorative painting. So these little things we were looking for all the time in the building, and whether it was a original wall or not. And then again, it shows we only removed what we had to remove to put in the different items.
Mm.
And
Yes.
then the reason why there's nothing there on that one section of the outside is because that whole section of plaster had failed.
Oh, yes. Well, thankfully, you had people to bring back there to really recreate some of those treatments. Is absolutely amazing. The result. If you move
Yeah,
then
and it
to
was really
next.
cool with the plasters, with the tools that they used to duplicate the finish, so it all blended in. It was really great.
So here you see some documents that Sean and the team had access to, and again you can see the state of the house. This was absolutely essential to have access to these, and these drawings were in Arizona in the archives at the time. The next slide, I believe that there are some the photo that you love, right? Well, we like to love and hate it at the same time because it shows us a lot. It does also doesn't show us a whole lot. And we wish for light fixtures and table and all that, but we'll take it. You really were grateful for those. The next, so let's just go through it because we're going to be running out of time. But I wanted to reference what Sean dealt with. This you can see photo of how the house is slowly coming together with the additional walls that were put there for apartments in mid 1940s, and the point of reference with this beautiful historic photograph. And then the next one is also the next slide is also showing the state, and as we Sean mentioned about the walls covered with paint and not really quite visible. The final result that Wright wished for was completely gone. So then we're just gonna swim through some photos quickly of how it looks now. That's, you see, it's just kind of amazing to jump from what they had to deal with, and then the final result that the visitors can see today. And here, just an example, there is a line on the original brick of the fireplace. So Sean, those kind of things came up too, right? That there was still kind of a ghost mark from the time when these were apartments, and that still remains there, that mark.
Yeah, with using the Secretary of Interior standards of the gentlest means possible of being able to preserve the surface and not damage it. Yeah, we cleaned it as best as we could, and that's as far as we could take it without doing any further damage to it.
So then the next, all this encaustic you can admire so much, especially in this beautiful space under the skylight, and the additional beautiful detailed drawing that gave a lot of clues to the crew. And then we wanted to highlight some of the craftsmen that, Sean, what I admire about Sean, he was such a he coordinated such a big team of people, and it was just incredibly difficult. So now we're going to the back, and that posed a whole bunch of problems, right?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a challenge. Now, during the occupation of when the Westcotts had the building, they actually put this addition on, and it was a big question with the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy and the Westcott House Foundation long before Martyr got here. That what to do with the building, how to treat the building, what are we bringing it back to, what data significance and restoration. That's still a little bit above my pay grade too, but they decided to take the back of the addition off, and then as you see, we have the addition on the left, and then the stairs going in. To remove all of those and to bring it back to what it was in this slide that Marta showed you. But however, we found different clues in the framing that showed that the way Wright had originally designed it was not how it was physically built. So we brought that up to the architects, and we decided to return the back part of the building as it was actually built, not how Wright had drawn it, because it wasn't built that way. And so the urban legend is that we're wondering how much influence Ophelia had with how she wanted her house.
Orpha.
But of course, that's just
Oh,
my speculation and my hypothesis. But and then there's a little change also. The children's playroom windows, and then also the staircase into the basement was different than what Wright had also. So there were changes on this done throughout the life of the house, which wasn't on the original Frank Lloyd Wright drawings.
And if we move to another slide, you can also see the just this wall is so essential to the so visible from the street, and then the level of destruction there is quite something.
Yeah,
And also,
yeah. The salt and the concrete just started delaminating and just falling apart over the years. And so this is actually all a brand new structure, concrete and rebar and poured concrete and redone. Yes.
And then the next slide, I think we're going to see some work being done. And as you can see, that wall now, you see it on the left. It looks pretty nice. It's refinished.
Right. This is before the pergola, and then you have the plaster from Orrin Associates, and then Scott Schroer here in the yellow hard hat with durable slate. So what is interesting is that we saved the stucco columns of the pergola and put new wood down in them so we could save the historic fabric. We were doing little things like that to, save as much of the original fabric as possible. And that's, we, went along with the tax credits and the Save America's Treasures grant too. So.
And then the next slide, I believe, will show us just working from the scratch when it comes to the perennial garden.
Yeah, Carol came up with a great idea with doing all of her research with all the different Wright properties and such, and of the time period, and created a spectacular arrangement of cut flowers and beautiful flowers back there. Yeah.
Yeah, I just love it because it's now, after so many years, it looks quite different. So and those beginnings were just incredible. So then the next slide, I think that's going to show us, we can just move from one slide to another, so you have reference of how the team just put this beautiful project on trajectory to really bloom, and to the visitorship, proved to be steady. Of course, we had a bit of challenge during COVID, but it's all back now to pre-pandemic numbers, and people continue to admire this house so much and come from all around the country to see it. So it's kind of, I think it's hard to really be sure when you launch such big project, whether it's going to really work out and whether it's going to truly resonate with people. But we are happy to report that it really worked. And Sean, we could spend hours talking to you, and we actually just talked about it, that we absolutely need to do that to capture all this, because it's incredible. And your memory, by the way, my goodness, I mean, after almost 20 years, after 20 years.
Yeah, that's actually one of my curses. I'm actually able to remember a lot of details of many of the projects we've been on. So, and yeah, all of the people that worked on here, all the management from Durable Slate, from Michael Chan, Sarah Downey, Gary Howes, to Charlie Troyer, Troy Holman, Matt Wolf, Bill Corin, Scott Shore, the architectural team, and then of course John Landis and Craig Dillon and Matt Klein and Courtney Vandeford and Sonia, all of the original people. Yeah. There's
You
a
see
lot
how
of people
kind he
involved.
is. He recollects all those people. That is just
what a truly incredible restoration journey. It was amazing to see those images. Marta, I was wondering, could you just briefly walk us through the timeline of ownership of the property so that we can better understand how we got to the state that the house was in when, Sean first encountered it in 2001?
Yeah, so basically the first family, Westcott family, was there through 1926. So they moved in 1908 by the end of that year. In 1926, the new owner took over, then his son took over, and after World War II, pretty much immediately after World War II, it was divided into apartments by the new owner, who sole purpose to purchase the property was that idea of basically a business proposition to turn it into apartments. And that pretty much remained an apartment complex for half a century. So until Sean's crew, everyone got together in 2000, we say it's around 2000, right? But really the restoration started 2001.
And how did the neighborhood change from 1908 to 2000?
Mhm. Well, we are very fortunate with this house that it remains in a somewhat it's a historic district. So there are some additions here and there, but many of the houses survived. And across the street there is a second oldest cemetery, which looks more like a park these days, but it's a beautiful context for the house. So there's not much new development around, which is nice to have.
Yeah, definitely. Sean, I was interested, you briefly mentioned or referenced, the thermal system. What other updates to make the property more sustainable happened during this restoration project?
Really good question. So we had a brand new tile made by Ludovici and Company to match the original tile. Actually, when they started dismantling the back section, in the roof section of the addition, Matt Klein found an original tile. And so that gave us the color, the shape, the size, and so we knew what we were doing. So we did that. We ended up putting in turn-coated stainless steel box gutters and roofs so we would not be having the lead runoff from lead-coated copper. Okay, so that was an environmental treatment. The geothermal, of course, recycles the Earth's temperature and the heat or the cooling from the temperature of the Earth, so that we're not using fossil fuels. So that's adding a little bit more stability there. And then uh, that's all that I can think of. At that time, we weren't necessarily thinking so much. I think the architects, that's more of a question for them. And so they were thinking a little bit of that. The sustainability in the historic restoration market wasn't as big as it is now. You have to remember, this is 20 years previous. The industry has grown where we're starting to look at ways to do that. But back then, it was just a beginning industry, the green industry.
Yeah, I was actually surprised when you pointed that out, and think it's incredible that's part of the project.
Well, we were able to reuse the radiators too. So we had the same heat source in the same location. We just had to add cooling, and we snake that in certain things. So it actually, for the building itself, still having the heat at the same points, is actually the environment for the building is actually better.
Definitely. I have a joint question first for you, Sean. What was the most surprising discovery during the process? And then Marta, for you, during your tenure, with the house, what might you have encountered where you had to, call Sean up because you needed his expert advice?
So the most interesting thing that we found, it's sort of documented in the video, when Carrie Rasikas is following Charlie and I around and I'm looking at the drawings and stuff, that was actually I couldn't have scripted that. That was real life. We were doing the back staircase and we were looking at the scars in the wall and figuring out what the cabinetry was like. And Carrie caught that all on footage. It is fabulous. But that's kind of the stuff that we were doing. We would look at certain things. That was the back wall of the house, finding, different nail patterns, different things that we weren't expecting. And then it was always little treasures like that. No gold, no fabrics, no wallpaper, none of the usual, no coins, none of the usual stuff you find, no doubloons, but at least I'm not saying, not just joking. But, it's just things like that. That would be, from my view, the challenges and the things that we saw.
So for me, as you can see, based on this conversation, Sean is so cared deeply about people involved, and so he's a great resource to be even like, oh, who did this part, or who did this part? Or can you put me in touch with people who finished certain furniture, part in a house, or detail oriented, like, do you think we can find this hardware? What kind of hardware would be appropriate to replace this piece, and things like
Yeah,
that?
that's
It's
funny.
just
That
all
question
over.
just came up. That question just came up, I think, 2 years ago. They wanted to know about the window hardware, and I
Yeah.
could had to go through my notes and the exact product and the exact manufacturer I remembered.
Amazing. Marta, what's next on the restoration horizon for Westcott House?
Well, we are, we've had since 2005 when we opened to the public, we had some, always, as you know, there's always a restoration project ahead of us. So we are now trying to tackle there's a flat portion of the roof on the garage that we are struggling with, and we need to evaluate and see whether it needs to be replaced. We just, we had to rebuild the pergola. We had to do some major things, but that's to be given. I mean, it's just part of the house is quite high maintenance, and with the stucco and a lot of wood surface exposed to the elements, it's something that we always need to keep an eye on.
Yep, it's taking care of an old house. Always something.
Yes. So it always starts with email to Sean and others. Give us ideas. What should we do? Help.
Cyclical maintenance.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
And as always, Wright Virtual Visits exists both as an educational tool and to build awareness around Frank Lloyd Wright's numerous contributions to the history of architecture and design. And our hope is that many of you tuning in today will venture out and actually visit publicly accessible sites like Westcott House. So Marta, could you please let us know how one experiences Westcott House today and what sort of special programming you might have in the works?
Yes, we have a couple slides, but I won't go into depth here because I know we're running out of time. But basically, if you go to our website, westcotthouse.org, and you go to the menu to programs, you can see all the upcoming things. We do work on a number of different initiatives in addition to our ongoing tour program. So it's really lovely to see house in different ways, either drawing in the garden or being there after hours. And we also have special initiative in partnership with the Springfield Museum of Art. So all our current visitors receive a free ticket to see exhibit that focuses on Wright by photographer Tom Schiff. So just go there and you'll find everything that is upcoming. And we really excited again, and I hear it from other sides that the visitation is coming back strongly, and that's really what we need. So we want to say thank you for your ongoing interest and venturing out into the all over United States to see those beautiful gems.
Definitely, and I personally need to visit. A visit is long overdue for me.
Yeah, I would love to go back to Buffalo as well.
Well, thank you, Marta. Thank you, Sean. And thank you, everyone out there for tuning in today. And we look forward to seeing you next month on September 14th, when we'll be traveling virtually to Hollyhock House in Los Angeles. One of my favorites. This is sure to be an excellent episode. So same time, same place on September 14th. And as a reminder, all recordings of past episodes are ready to view at savewright.org/WVV. And so take care, and we'll see you next month.